The Furies step into frame, and the show stops asking for patience. The sound hits first, that clicking, that horror-coded insect rhythm that tells you immediately this is not a species you debate with. Then the faces, slightly out of phase, spatially wrong, like the room cannot fully contain them. And here's what changed everything for me. The camera does not panic. The shots breathe. The geography is clear. People are calling out positions, maps are visible. You understand where everyone is. That is Star Trek. And in that moment, I stopped reviewing this show and started watching it. What's up, my know-it-alls? All right. We're talking about Starfleet Academy Season 1, Episode 6, Come Let's Away, which I know I said I wasn't going to review anymore, but this was a good episode. For 5 weeks, I've been critical of the show, not because I enjoyed tearing it down, but because I felt like it was insulating itself from consequence. I felt like the 32nd century was cosmetic. I felt like the stakes were theatrical instead of dangerous. Episode 6 changed that. Not because it was darker, because it was confident. So let's walk through the math. The Furies are the first enemy this season that feels like an actual problem. They don't monologue. They click. They screech. They move wrong. Their faces distort like the space around them is slightly misaligned. That visual phasing effect matters because Trek normally gives you spatial clarity. You know where things are. You understand the room. Here, the enemy corrupts that clarity. But the show doesn't. The blocking is clean. The cuts are deliberate. The geography is established. This is not frantic editing hiding weak choreography. This is controlled staging under pressure. So when Lieutenant Commander Tomov sacrifices himself, it lands. And yes, my brain made the red shirt joke for like half a second, but the reason that moment works is not irony. It works because the episode did the tactical math in front of you. You know what his sacrifice buys. You know why it had to happen. The show doesn't cushion it with swelling sentimentality. It lets the space hold. That is editorial bravery. Then later, when the Vulcan Cadet is killed, that lands even differently. Tomov's sacrifice is command cost. The Cadet's death is institutional trauma. That's the Academy losing one of its own. And that's when you understand the training wheels are gone. And for the first time this season, the show doesn't protect itself. Now let's talk about the 32nd century. I've said repeatedly that the show felt disconnected from the future that it claimed to inhabit. Episode 6 is the first time the century behaves like a century. The technology feels advanced. The singularity drive feels dangerous. The ship graveyard feels like history instead of a set. The threat feels post-burn. And the Lanthanite lore about how Aket experiences time actually lands, not as trivia, as character texture. It reframes her leadership. It reframes her patience. It reframes her willingness to compromise.
I read that since Lanthanites essentially live forever, they can lose sight of when things begin and end. Without the beginnings and ends of things, you could get caught in a trauma loop that just goes on and on and on forever.
That's lore that functions. Braca finally becomes real. For 5 episodes, he felt like posture. This time, he feels strategic. The alliance breathes long enough to feel plausible, which makes the betrayal inevitable instead of theatrical. And I think that's pacing confidence. Tarima's arc works because it costs her. Removing the suppressor is not romantic empowerment. It's catastrophic. It saves everyone and leaves her in a coma. That's consequence. Sam is injured. A cadet dies. A command officer sacrifices himself. Aket compromises her ethics. No one walks away untouched. Here's the honest part. I went into this episode prepared to keep critiquing. And somewhere between the Furies arriving and Tomov's sacrifice, I realized I was leaning forward. I wasn't bracing. I wasn't drafting arguments in my head, waiting for my turn to speak, if you will. I was watching, like a Star Trek fan. And it felt very, very good. Now, this episode's not flawless, okay? Caleb's resurfacing animosity towards Starfleet feels abrupt given how sidelined he's been. The opening intimacy scene is way more explicit than I think was necessary.
All this time you have been on my mind, and all the reasons why we're still in love.
And I can really make a case that some of the supporting roles sort of risk redundancy, but none of that undermines the spine, because the spine is danger. It's not shock value, danger. There's a competent enemy. There's clear geography, earned sacrifice, leadership under strain, real cost. If this episode had aired as episode 2, we'd be having a completely different conversation about this series. And I think that brings us to the real test. This season will live or die by how it responds to episode 6. If next week we reset emotionally, if Terima wakes up and the coma becomes a footnote, if the Vulcan cadet's death fades into the background noise, if Braca drifts back into theatrical villainy, then this was a spike. A strong spike, but a spike. If instead we sit in the trauma, if Caleb carries what he witnessed, if Ake's compromise scars her command, if the Academy shifts because it just watched one of its own die, and if the Furies establish kind of a new baseline for threat, then I think this episode was not just a good episode. This will be the hinge. For 5 weeks, the show has felt experimental. Episode 6 felt inevitable. And that is a completely different category of storytelling. So there you go. Now you know. And if knowing is half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all yourself. What is the know-it-all index for Starfleet Academy, episode 6? Come, let's away. All right. So the production trusted its horror language. The editing trusted stillness. The blocking trusted geography. And the writing allowed cost. The villain became strategic instead of symbolic, and the 32nd century, for me anyway, finally felt lived in instead of referenced. And most importantly, I stopped reviewing and started watching. Now, that's not nostalgia. That's craft alignment. And this is also the reason why I'm giving this episode a very well-earned 9.5 out of 10. If you think I'm overreacting, tell me why. If you felt some of the same shift when the Furies arrived, I want to hear it. And if you're still skeptical, I think the real test is going to be next week. So comment below. Let me know what you thought, because I know that in for a penny, in for a pound, I wasn't going to review this week. And then the episode blew the doors off. And I was like, well, I have to stick my 2 cents in now. I mean, I can't put my foot in it last week and not come back this week and say, hey man, good work. So good work. This was excellent. I hope next week stands up or stands right next to it, shoulder to shoulder. And I'm here hoping that it does. And I hope you do too. But no matter what, let me know what you think down in the comments, and we'll talk again real soon. Next week, no doubt. All right, guys. Never forget, everyone loves a know-it-all. Bye, guys.